Sometimes you do things the old-fashioned way. Rang the bell. So Brianna should be streaming by now. And we will go ahead and call the meeting of the Yelm City Council of August 25th, 2020 to order. And as is our custom, we'll start with a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I see Tracy's with us now. Would the city clerk take the roll, please?
Councilmember James Blair.
Here.
Councilmember Molly Carmody.
Here.
Councilmember EJ Curry.
Here.
Councilmember Ted Stillwell.
Here.
Councilmember Tracy Wood.
Here.
Councilmember Joe DePinto.
Here.
Councilmember Terry Kaminsky.
Here.
Mayor J.W. Foster.
Here.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Can we have an approval of the agenda, please?
I move we approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
That was by Councilmember Wood and seconded by Curry. Remember, although most of the time Lori's going to be able to see this for the purpose of keeping accurate minutes, if you're making a motion or a second, please state your name for her. So with our special, with our agenda approved, we're going to start right in with our special
Point of order.
And
Point of order, Mayor.
yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we have to vote on it.
You're
We need
right.
a first and a second.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. I think I was really interested in hearing what Mark has to say. So there's a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion about the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Same sign? No, we've got to wait. Okay, we got our agenda. Thank you, Joe. So now we have the Executive Director of the Thurston Regional Planning Council here. Mark, have you been there for 3 years now?
I have been here for 3 years, yes.
Excellent. And we're really looking forward to your talk on the transportation priorities. So take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for making the time for this on your agenda this evening. I talked to your council as we were starting this work a couple of years ago. One of the highest priorities for Thurston Regional Planning Council and for our Transportation Policy Board for about the past 4+ years has been to take a look at congestion on I-5 and really through Thurston County as a whole, and look at ways that we can improve mobility for all modes, and for all vehicles on I-5 and on those alternative routes. And I really appreciate the time today because we're at a pretty critical time in this work. We're done with the first phase where we've identified some key strategies that will help with congestion. And also we are on the cusp of both the House and Senate, State House and Senate. We're expecting that there will be discussions about a transportation budget package in the coming session. And so wanted to make sure to get out to all of our interested parties on this work so folks know what's being proposed and what I hope will be talked about as we head into this legislative session in January. So I'm going to share my screen now. Oh, it says host has disabled participant screen sharing. Someone able to?
Grant should be working feverishly on that.
I'm
right
sure
now.
that I'm sure he is. I'll just keep trying it until it lets me. Okay. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
It's just came through.
All right, good.
Okay. So hopefully at this point you are seeing my screen with my starting slide on it. Is
Yes,
that,
we are.
oh, except for I don't want it in that mode. Well, I'll just deal with it because I don't want to waste any more of your time. So moving right ahead. So pretty much everything that I will talk about this evening is included in this phase 1 report. So as folks might remember, we received about 550,000 from the state legislature in 2019 to do this first phase of work. And with funds from the Nisqually Indian Tribe, from State Department of Transportation, from Thurston Regional Planning Council, we were able to leverage closer to $1 million to get a lot of the work done to take a look at our current conditions, our future conditions, and what kinds of strategies will have the greatest impact on mobility in our area. If you want to dig into the details of it, this report, this is the website where you can look at that phase 1 report that has a lot more detail than I'll go through this evening. And I am going to try and switch my screen real quick because I want you to be able to see better. So I'm going to, hopefully now you're seeing a bigger version of that screen. Good. Okay. So first order of business, we updated our traffic model with help from DOT so that we were able to take a much more comprehensive, detailed look at what kind of conditions we expect to see. And the first order of business was look at 2040 and see how big of an issue do we have. And what the model shows is we're going to have considerable issues with congestion. What you're looking at here on the screen, this is I-5 coming up to 101. That's 101 here off to the west, and I-5 up through to about 109 here. And what looks like a red line, those are actually individual red dots. And those red dots represent vehicles that are going under 40 miles per hour. And this is on any given weekday. These aren't bad conditions. This isn't where there's an accident. This is what we would expect on any given weekday for I-5 to look like between about 4 and 6 p.m. So we're going to have considerable congestion if we just carry the status quo forward. So next was what kinds of things can we do about it? And we looked at over 100 different strategies and grouped them into these 10 scenarios. The operation scenario was relatively small things like the roundabouts that I'll talk about just to the east of Yelm. Things like what happens to the transportation system if we were to fully implement the Sustainable Thurston land use plan. What happens if we increase transportation demand management actions? Those are things like telework and staggered schedules. What happens if we fully implement intercity transit's long range plan? What happens if we use the shoulder on I-5 in some places for traffic during those peak periods? We looked at converting one of the existing lanes to a high occupancy vehicle lane or a carpool lane through the project area. We took all the projects from all of our jurisdictions that are in the regional transportation plan and we put those into the model to see what kind of effects those have now and in the future. We looked at interchange improvements. One of the big bottlenecks in this area is I-5 and 101. But we looked at every one of the interchanges, and actually the study has suggestions for improvements to all the interchanges on I-5 through that area. And then we looked at adding a lane through the whole project area. First, we looked at that being a high occupancy vehicle lane or a carpool lane. And then we looked at adding that lane and having it be open to all traffic. And the way that we evaluated the effectiveness of these scenarios is we had 5 buckets of metrics, but altogether there were more than 20 different metrics that took data out of the model, and that was used to assess how effective these scenarios were. And this was a WashDOT-led process. We had a technical advisory group with the transportation specialists from all the jurisdictions were part of that technical group. We also had an executive team that included elected leadership from around this region and WashDOT. And those two bodies were the bodies that made decisions on things like what metrics are we going to use and what is the weighting going to be of those metrics. And so those 5 buckets, we looked at efficiency and equity. Those were things like how many people can the system move through at any given time, and what is the access for people of color, for poor sectors of our population, for people without vehicles, people with disabilities. Those were included in that efficiency and equity bucket of metrics. We looked at travel times. Then that was basically how long does it take you to get from point A to point B, and we defined a bunch of those point A's and point B's throughout the system and looked at how did the different scenarios impact those travel times. Resilience, in this case, that was really resilience of alternate roadways like Highway 507, like Martin Way and Pacific, those routes that people take instead of getting on I-5. We looked at accessibility. And in this case, this was access to jobs and commercial services and the ability for freight to move within the county and in and out of the county. And then we looked at environment. For this part, this was just the transportation part. I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that's being done through Nisqually Indian Tribe, where they are looking at some of the flood risk potential and some of the aquatic habitat or fish habitat impacts. But for this part, the transportation part, environment looks at greenhouse gas emissions. And so when you take all of those metrics and you take this weighting, we came up with this overall effectiveness. And so looking forward to putting together a budget package, we looked at these areas where we've got the most potential benefit and pulled really from most of these areas. Sustainable thirst and land use, that is not included in this transportation proposal because that's not really a state transportation issue, that's a local decision-making issue. So what is being proposed? Overall, the study it outlines somewhere between $2 and $4 billion worth of improvement in this area. And we started by looking at the strategies that looked like they had the greatest amount of potential benefit, and in a dollar figure that seemed like it might be more realistic for an ask in a state transportation budget package. So I'm going to talk about these. It's also worth noting that we to show the legislature how investment over time could be accomplished, we put these into biennia and did it over a 4 biennium or 8-year period to show how we could stagger this investment over the course of a transportation budget package. So what does this include? It includes transportation demand management in $5 million. This is largely about telework, staggering schedules, things that allow people to not drive, because studies that were pre-COVID studies found that for roughly every 1% reduction in vehicles yields about a 3 times that decrease in congestion. So can be a really effective strategy for really adding capacity to the system without adding more roadway to the system. And we've seen how this works through this COVID response. What this graph is showing you is basically volumes on I-5 2020 compared to 2019 for the period of March 1st to August. we saw things drop dramatically with this stay home, stay healthy order, and we started to see things creep back up, which I think we probably all noticed on the roadway. So with this, we're looking at how can we capitalize on those benefits that we've seen of telework into the future, knowing that obviously we don't want to be doing it at the kind of rate we're doing it now, but how can we keep some of that benefit moving forward?
Mark, could I
Yes,
interrupt you for a
of
moment?
course you can.
Councilmember Blair has a question for you.
Oh, yes, anytime.
Could you go back a couple slides?
This one?
I have a question for the part-time shoulder use. I'm just curious. I'm assuming that it's just does it just involve cleaning up the shoulder and probably involving some kind of signage why it would cost 15 million to do that? Or do you actually have to extend the shoulder?
They won't have to extend the shoulder, and actually that's this next one. And so this is between Sleater, Kinney, and Henderson in the southbound direction. And the 15.3 million is they will need to do some work to harden that shoreline. I'm sorry, that shoulder. It's not shoulders are not meant to handle, for example, a heavy truck on regular periods. So they'll have to do some work to strengthen the shoulder so that it can be used by all vehicles during that peak period. So that's what that cost is.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes. Another one of the interchanges, this is northbound I-5 at Pacific Avenue, 3.6 million, basically adds another lane to this off-ramp to help avoid people queuing on I-5 in the northbound direction to get off on Pacific. And it also really helped, Pacific's one of those alternate routes that we were focused on, and it helps the function of Pacific as well. 3.6 million. The part that you all will care most about is 3 roundabouts on Highway 507 at the intersection of 702, Vale Road, and also Bald Hill Road at 19 million. These looked really good in the traffic model. Obviously, they help at times when we've got closures on I-5, but we actually found that these roundabouts functioned well enough that it pulls some trips off of I-5. So this has benefits for a lot of different reasons. High capacity transit planning, there was a big public outreach component of that phase 1 work. And one of the things people were most interested in is improved options for getting to Pierce and King counties via transit. So we're looking at increased express service and potentially rail, and getting that started at 1.5 million.
We have a question from Councilmember DePinto.
Thank you, Mayor. Should we get full fund, or should there be a transportation package, and should we get full funding in that? When do you think we could see construction? What kind of timeline could we expect for those roundabouts in Yelm?
That would depend a lot on the timing of the transportation package, and if the legislature kind of agreed with the 4 biennia schedule that we laid out, but sometime within the next 10 years, I would say. Northbound I-5-101 interchange, a lot of work here. This is one of the 2 biggest pinch points in our system. This also basically hardens the shoulder so that people can queue up for 101 on the side instead of backing up this part of traffic at 4.1 million. In the southbound direction, this is one of our biggest problem areas and was pretty challenging to come up with a strategy that actually helped. And so, but DOT did a good job. It just kept trying things until we found one that worked. And this essentially is a collector distributor lane. And what I mean is, so in the future, everyone who's looking to either get off on to Plum Street or to go to the Capitol or to go to 101 would exit I-5 in the southbound direction at Plum Street, and then they'd be on this separate lane where they can either peel off to go to Plum or the Capitol, or just keep on going right through to 101. And this eliminates a lot of that weaving that happens currently, which is the big cause of the slowdowns through that area. 61.8 million. Martin Way Interchange, a lot of reconstruction here, because this is another area where we are already seeing backups in both directions as people queue to get off of I-5 especially. So this creates a partial clover leaf, lets people get off quicker, helps Martin Way a lot by eliminating some of the left-hand turns. It also helps intercity transit. This little spur here allows intercity transit their own entrance to this park and ride facility. Currently, they have to make a left-hand turn here that's getting increasingly difficult for them. And then lastly, I keep talking about one of two major pinch points. Our other big pinch point is southbound I-5 in Pierce County, actually. And as the work that's going on right now to add a lane through JBLM concludes and scheduled for 2025, and those 4 lanes go down to 3 here in DuPont, what you're looking at here is also that 2040 during the peak hour from 4 to 6. Again, those red dots are individual cars going less than 40 miles per hour, and we will expect to see a backup from DuPont up to about milepost 125 or 126. And so the only strategy that we have found to deal with that is adding a lane through the project area. But that is a $2 to $4 billion proposition because we are dealing with a lot of different factors. We've got the 2 bridges over the Nisqually that would need to be addressed. We've got the Burlington Northern Santa Fe trestle that would need to be redone. The Sound Transit trestle would need to be redone. So huge piece of work. And part of the huge piece of work across the Nisqually Delta is widening the span of the bridge, because what we have found, and this is what the Nisqually Indian tribe are working on right now, is this configuration on I-5 across the Delta, during peak flows, you see it really between 90 and 97, because we had big flooding years in both 96 and 97. The channel just started cutting its own path towards I-5, because as the water backed up during that peak flow, that energy wanted to go somewhere, and it started cutting the channel towards I-5. And we're just seeing that's only now between 50 and 70 yards between the channel and I-5. So the Nisqually's work is expected to be done in the end of October, but that's going to tell us a lot about the flood risk, and it's also going to tell us about the habitat issues, because that same constraint is keeping this area, this estuary area on the other side of I-5 from functioning as well as it could if we had a wide span. And the Nisqually tribe owns all this land and would like to see this have much higher salmon habitat potential than it does today, and widening that span would help to accomplish that.
Question from Councilmember Wood.
Yes, and just so you know, I'm about done, so now I can just open up to questions at this point.
Hey, Mark, my question is, when you showed that photo of the red dots, one more back, that one, making a red line, I see that it's 4/12/02. So, or what is that? 6 o'clock?
Yep.
6 o'clock in the evening on
any given weekday.
6/12/02. Now you're saying that's a snapshot at 6/12/02. You're saying that virtually every day running through Interstate 5 right here, there's traffic moving, that much traffic moving slower than 40 miles an hour.
That's right. That's what we will expect in 2040. And then the main reason for that is when you go from 4 lanes all through here down to 3, there's enough traffic trying to get into Thurston County, which doesn't surprise any of us, that's the backup that we'll see because of that loss of lane. And again, the only strategy that the model shows, the only strategy we have to deal with this is adding capacity to I-5.
All right, Mark, are you seeing any impact as far as with the rates or the fee removed from intercity transit as far as ridership and it positively impacting this situation with the volume of traffic during these peak hours?
Tracy, I'm not 100% certain I follow the question. Intercity transit's impact because of what? Because of I-976? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, more or less what I'm asking is obviously we've got to figure out a route to decrease volume through here at these peak hours or create more road surface. But what I understand is if memory serves, during that whole campaign with intercity transit, that had to do with that was going to in fact give us some impact on all of this. And what I'm asking is, have you seen any impact as of yet due to that change?
No, not really, especially not really in this area, because intercity transit does run bus service up to Lakewood, but it's pretty limited and doesn't have a great deal of regular ridership. And so no, that is why looking at high capacity transit options is one of the strategies included in this, because we haven't really cracked that nut, especially for this area going north into Pierce County and then back into Thurston County.
Councilmember Carmody is our rep to intercity transit. I think she wants to comment on that question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Mark's right about the whole interstate. Like, intercity transit doesn't generally have a whole lot of buses going up as expresses to the Tacoma Lakewood area, but in general, intercity transit ridership was up by at least 30% before COVID hit. And obviously since then it's really decreased a lot, but they're working on getting back up to speed as far as ridership and actual bus routes and number of routes and number of trips that they take in the next 6 months or so. So, I mean, hopefully we'll be able to tell, after this whole COVID thing, whether or not, it's making a difference. But before COVID, it was doing just fine.
One more thing I want to be able to add is I've been giving this presentation to every entity that will give me some time on their agenda. There are, as I mentioned, this was a proposal for 204 million. That is not a small proposal, and yet it's important for folks to know that there some partners are interested in us asking for the full $2 to $4 billion in to be included in this transportation package. So I'm not really certain where that's going to land, but there's talk of somewhere between the 204 million that's proposed here and the 2 to 4 billion that would be needed in total.
Tracy?
Mark, I'm curious if you can tell us what percentage of those trips that run through Interstate 5 through Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater, what percentage of those trips is actually, I mean, if is actually local folks running, working in Tumwater, living in Lacey, vice versa, doing their, growing up in Olympia, I know I've done a lot of travel on I-5 without leaving the Metroplex.
I will make sure to send you the precise information, but because I remember that it's either 60% or 40%, I can't remember which way it goes, it is through traffic, people that their trip starts outside of the county and ends outside of the county. But let me get you that specific information and I'll send it to staff. Sorry, I don't recall that.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Very good. Well, excellent presentation as expected, Mark, and kudos to you and your staff and the whole TRPC for the work that they're doing on keeping us moving. It's an easy segue over to our other distinguished guests, Representatives Wilcox and Barkas, who can share some time with us to give us an idea of what the legislature is going to be up to this year. Maybe address some of those things Mark brought up.
I'll defer to our transportation lead, Andrew Barkis.
Oh, well, I yield the floor to my seatmate, my leader. Well, okay, whatever.
He left.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're the junior member of the second district, but not so junior anymore. Hey, Yelm City Council, good to see you all tonight, and thank you for inviting myself and Rep. Wilcox to join you. I wish we were all in person together. I am about sick and damn tired of these Zoom meetings, as I'm sure we all are. And as soon as possible, I think that we should all hold a giant fundraising event at the Yelm Bowling Alley, right next to Hometown Property Management, by the way, and support that facility and have a damn good time. Sound like a good idea, Mr. Mayor? I think
Yeah.
so.
And Mickey's ready to open up for you.
Let's do it, man. I cannot wait. We'll be there in December again for the 6th year in a row and buying the place out. But hey, Mark, thanks so much for the presentation on the study that we're doing. As you know, most of you know, I'm the ranking member on the Transportation Committee, have been for the last couple of years, was instrumental in securing the funding for that particular study and have worked very closely with Mark, the TRPC, the South Sound military partnership that is organizing a lot of these, Thurston County Chamber, et cetera, et cetera. And we all know how important it is for the movement of goods and services and our citizens throughout the region to have a robust transportation system. We've seen the impacts when there is a crisis, whether it be a flood or a train wreck, to the community of Yelm and the outlying areas. And it is imperative that we continue to push for the improvement of the infrastructure around this area. I'm not going to lie, it is going to be a very, very big lift. Even those roundabouts on 507s. Representative Wilcox submitted requests for those projects a year ago. They are in the queue to be considered, but you know, they're great on paper, but there's no money to back it up. So it's just a tough haul. We are facing significant challenges in the transportation arena, about a $1 billion plus deficit due to COVID. You know, revenue is incredibly reduced right now. All the different impacts, I-976 impact that we were already dealing with on top of all this. So I'm really looking forward to going back to work in January. Well, I haven't stopped working, but if we are ever brought back into session, and I would highly encourage you to let the governor know that it's really a good idea that we all get back to Olympia sooner than later to have a session to deal with this. Because we're just facing some major challenges, and we need to be part of this process. So, but we're going to continue to advocate for this entire network from 702 to 507 to 510 to I-5 to make sure that the next 10 to 20 years are addressed as we continue to anticipate the continual growth of the region. You also know that I am the lead on all things housing related, passed some pretty important legislation this last year when dealing with the Growth Management Act and SEPA and how we can get at increasing our supply. Yelm and the outlying areas of your community are perfect for continued growth and the opportunity to build to address the shortfalls in our supply, our housing supply. And that continued growth of the region is very important. Smart growth, how we do it, what the impacts are on our infrastructure, water, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all very important. Let me give you just a real quick update on the bypass. I checked in with staff here, and I have to say this last year I was a little disappointed. Both Representative Wilcox and myself and Senator Becker pushed here a couple years ago to advance the funding for the project. And what we were able to do is advance the initial funding for design work and some of the ancillary things that were to be done. Now that has been done. This last session, JW and Michael came down and Joe and others came down to Olympia. We talked, and what we were finding out is OSDOT let us know that they've run into environmental issues, i.e. the pocket gopher, and other things that are impacting the continuation of the bypass, the finalization. And so this has created some delays in the project. Now, as of literally a couple days ago from staff, they tell me that the goal continues to move forward to put this out for bid come late spring, early summer of 2021. So, 6-8 months from now. That upon receipt of that construction should begin in 2022 with a completion of 2023. So this is the original time frame somewhat, but it is frustrating because I was hoping, and we were under the impression that it was moved up a little bit. And the open house, the input from public, I think has ended. They have the information. And the only other thing that I can tell you, and I'm going to push back a little bit on this because I really want to find out some clarification, is the environmental piece. This piece with the pocket gopher, they're also referring to some cultural issues. I haven't heard of anything culturally, and that would be tribal. If there's something that was discovered archaeologically or whatever, I haven't heard anything along those lines. But then, COVID has impacted all, and I want to make sure that it's not, and I don't want to use the word excuse, but I don't want to have anything that's going to slow this thing down. We see where this is at. This is allocated. The funding is allocated. It is there. I made sure this last budget cycle, as we did the supplemental, that it was not messed with, that the money was remained in place, and that this project would continue. As far as the additional work that needs to be done, we will be submitting again the 507 roundabouts, 702, etc. Those critical pieces, and we will see where they need to go. There is talk of a transportation package of some sort. I personally I can't see how we're going to be doing that when we're facing the type of budget crisis that we're facing in the state of Washington on all levels. And to put the burden upon the people, the citizens of the state, is just, it seems to me, the really bad timing on that. So, but both Representative Wilcox and I will continue to advocate for these projects and the impacts that they have on Yelm. And it's an honor to serve the people of the 2nd District in the city of Yelm. Appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. I want to give a shout out to Joe. Joe has been great. He's a constant presence down there at the Capitol, keeping us informed of what's going on in the beautiful city of Yelm. And of course, the mayor and all of you, appreciate for reaching out and the support that you've given and keeping us informed of what's going on there. It's very important. I yield the floor to you, Mr. Senior Member Wilcox.
Well, are there any questions for Andrew before I start?
Michael probably has one, I'm sure. Stealthing down.
I have a question.
No, Terry.
Andrew, whatever happened with your lawsuit against the governor? Did that go anywhere?
Oh, thanks, Terry. Some of you may know that I, along with my colleagues as private citizens, not as representatives, took upon bringing a lawsuit against our governor. And just for clarification purposes, let me tell you that This lawsuit was not about questioning the governor's constitutional authority to declare an emergency. We agree, we supported that initially, and have supported that. The problem has been there's no precedence on how long this emergency is intended to last, and the proclamations and basically the elimination of the legislative process that we're seeing now 6 months into this. That lawsuit was delayed. The courts have been all delayed because of the COVID. When it finally was heard, it was kind of a whirlwind. All of a sudden, it was just boom, there it was, and it was heard. The judge determined that based on the defense that was presented by the Attorney General on behalf of the governor in the state of Washington, that the governor doesn't have any enforcement authority on the proclamations that he's putting forth. So it's kind of interesting. So on one hand, you could interpret it that all these proclamations that have been put forth have no enforcement capacity, but basically what they were saying is that it's up to the individual agencies to enforce the proclamations as designed and put forth by the governor. Therefore, we would have to sue each and every agency of the state of Washington to find out what the precedent is. We're not going to do that. That was not our intent. Our intent was just to define the precedent on the timing of this. We believe the crisis is real. It exists. This pandemic exists. COVID-19 is real. But how long should the state of Washington be under an emergency proclamation? Many of us believe we should not be under emergency proclamation, that we should actually be utilizing all branches of government to deal with this crisis appropriately, properly, and expediently to take care of it moving forward. So that is why we did what we did, or I did what I did, me and a couple others.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I will just share a few things, and I'll get. Oh, by the way, I want to say I'm proud of Andrew and members of my caucus. They put their own money into this. There's not a budget, that is available to conduct lawsuits. Although I swear to God, there's somebody on my social media feed that tells me we need to sue somebody every single day.
Yeah, pretty much.
A few others put their own money into it. And I thought it was good to test this because we're in an unprecedented situation. So I appreciate Andrew and those people doing that. The thing that I want to take off the table, I knew that when I made a Facebook post that I had caught COVID, it would get a fair amount of attention. I wasn't surprised that it was front page on the Nisqually Valley News. I was a little surprised that I heard from people in Eastern Washington that it hit every TV station there. I'm fine. It turns out that being isolated in the office that's in my background here, in my house on the farm, didn't suck. And I had not really been out and about very much. I had to call 3 people and let them know that I might have exposed them. And one thing that I've talked a little bit about is it's no fun telling your friends that you may have exposed them. And even worse, maybe you indirectly exposed their older or ill friends or family. And thank goodness no one, not even Kathy, caught anything from me. But I've never said this is nothing. It's not just the flu either. There are times when I really quarrel with our approach to it, and the cost of what we're doing right now is immense, but it's not nothing. And when you have had it, even though it was no worse than a summer head cold for me. I heard from a close friend who is having relapses every month and may not be able to function in her career in the future. And I've got another very close friend with a son who's about 25, a paramedic, and his heart is impaired. So these things are not nothing. And I guess one other thing that I have really tried to let people know, because there's so many rumors about the tracing program, I did get called after quite a long time by a Pierce County tracer. He didn't want to install things on my phone. He was not intrusive. It was a very innocuous process. So I feel like I should share these things. Just a few things that I want to share with you about what I think is happening. Everything's about COVID right now. I think we should have a special session. I hope that we will do that either by a governor's call, which is what we've done throughout the history of Washington, or 2/3 of the legislature calling for that. It's never been done before, but it's recognized in the Constitution. And the reason I think that's important is we clearly have a big budget challenge. Latest forecast is down about 4 billion, maybe 4.5. We've got a that is about 3 billion. And this is what a rainy day fund is for. I don't have a problem with this. You know, we need to make some adjustments, and the budget's been growing at an immense rate. If we take 3 billion from the rainy day fund, we need to cut about 1 billion. That is less than 2% of the general fund, and far less than we've increased it over the last few years. So that would make sense, and it's a whole lot easier to cut $1 billion in a biennium that you know, has about 7 or 8 months left to run versus one that has 2 or 3 months left to run, which is what will happen if we don't do that. So I hope we do that. One of the things that I think is absolutely critical for people to understand, I'm afraid I made a group cry on Zoom the other day. I'll try not to do that to you. You know, we have an unprecedented situation right here, and it's really pretty much math, and math should be the same regardless of which party you are. And I think we've got people from 3 different parties on this call. That's a little uncommon. You know, nationally, the GNP was down 30% last quarter. And hopefully that's as bad as it gets, but you know, it's not going to go up 30. It's probably not going to go up at all. It's going to continue to be down for some time. And the economy is the thing that you know, pays for everything, and certainly pays for tax revenues. We have got to figure out how, when the most basic part of you know, the building blocks of our government revenues is down to that extent, we've got to figure out how do we address that. And that's another reason to do a special session. But I just keep telling people, this is a time when we need to reevaluate all of our assumptions. I especially feel that about the transportation world. And most of you know that I've been supportive of transportation. I don't think it's a bad thing to pay taxes to build a hard asset that builds the economy. You know, I certainly know that if you believe in building up the rural economy, you absolutely have to provide efficient ways of moving products from rural and small towns to you know, the big cities where the market is. And so I don't have a bias against transportation, but I do have a bias against going forward with plans that are based on assumptions that are totally obsolete. And I think there is almost no other arena right now where assumptions are more obsolete than transportation. We need to understand a few things. First of all, after this huge experiment in working from home, what is that going to change in the long run, and how much is that going to impact traffic? The other thing that is not very well recognized yet, but I think is among the biggest things that we're going to have to understand as a state, is what's going to happen to Boeing. You know, people like to turn the changes that may be coming to Boeing into politics, and there is some politics involved, but you know, the major issue is people aren't flying much. You know, add that on time, and how long is that going to last? It's not going to come back immediately. People have learned how to do meetings like this. And so the business traveler, you know, is going to do a lot less traveling, I think, in the future. And you stack that on top of the challenges that Boeing had with the 737. And now I think the very credible threat that the 787 is going to be consolidated in South Carolina. I do not want that to happen. I am not using that for politics, but this is a data point that we cannot afford to ignore. And if that happens, I can imagine no bigger blow to the Washington state economy that impacts the future of our tax revenues. Boeing, it's true, Boeing doesn't pay a really high tax rate, but certainly all of those dollars that flow into the economy go to every kind of business that you can imagine. Most of it north of here, most of it even north of Seattle. But to deny that that's going to make an impact on our transportation planning, our revenue planning, and what the state of Washington looks like is to just close your eyes and not recognize reality. So we have these assumptions that we're going to have to really evaluate, and I think that they impact our transportation budget, our capital budget, and our general fund budget. And we absolutely have to recognize those things. There is some hope that the feds are going to hold everybody harmless. And I think that there are going to be federal dollars, and I don't know what those are. You can certainly write a budget that recognizes those things as contingencies. But I think we also have to recognize that there's a limit to what the feds can do, and we may not even be able to anticipate what that limit is until it's too late. So, I'm not a pessimistic person, but I think that we have a ton of data points right now that point to lots of uncertainty, maybe chaos, and I'm not even going to go into the actual chaos that is taking place in some of our cities. And I just wish, some of you know that I took a stand against political violence and threats that was very painful and has changed my life, honestly. I think one thing that politicians need to do, and again, I'm not making this a left-right, Republican, Democrat thing. Politicians need to stand up against chaos. They need to stand up against violence. And if we don't do that, all of us, we are leaving a terrible legacy for our children and grandchildren. That's an important thing too, and maybe that's even important in small towns. Okay, those are the things that were sort of on my mind. I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
First up, JT and Andrew, I just want to thank you on behalf of all Yelm for the work that you've done over the last years and decade, in your case, JT. It's not just about traffic. You've also helped us with getting the land next to us will someday be an opportunity for people to get higher education right here in Yelm, which will help drive the economy here locally. There's a lot of things you guys are doing and your cohort is doing up there at the Hill that helps Yelm, and so that all roads will not always run through Yelm, but they'll actually stop here and shop here.
Let me interrupt for just a second. I appreciate you saying that, but those are taxpayer dollars. And, our job is to fight for our fair share of those, but they come out of, all the people that are part of the economy. And I never let myself forget that.
Well, we appreciate that. Does anyone, Councilmember DePino has a question.
Thank you. And it's more of a comment. I just want to say, kind of echoing the mayor there, we are very fortunate to have Representative Wilcox and Representative Barkis as our representatives here in Yelm, and Senator Becker as well. All three of them hold a leadership or an important position. Rep. Wilcox, obviously the Republican House leader, Rep. Barkis, the ranking on transportation, two very important committees. And Senator Becker is the caucus chair currently, although she's retiring this year. But we were very fortunate to have them as a strong voice at the Capitol, helping us, the city of Yelm and the 2nd District as a whole. Not all districts have kind of like the power team like that, but we're really fortunate to have them. So just thank you for all your efforts on getting the bypass through, getting the funding for that, and just fighting for all of our needs. Just thank you.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Mayor. And and I feel the same way that JT does. We appropriate the funds, and your members of the council and Joe and the mayor. I mean, you advocate for the needs of the citizens of Yelm and the area, and we do our very best to make sure that those taxpayer dollars are used to the highest and best use. And when it comes to the various things that we can do to assist the city, especially in the capital budget. The capital budget is one of those areas that this is where, those dollars usually translate into things that create more opportunity. And as the mayor referenced, the extension for the college out there, I mean, that is something where those dollars create more dollars and they create more opportunity. And so we're always looking the best way that we can do that.
Appreciate it. Any questions for the representatives? This is a rare opportunity for us to have them both here. This is awesome.
We should do this more.
It's pretty easy to do now.
It sure is.
Could we do it in your office next time though, JT?
Either one of them.
Yeah, you could be here. I just want to tell you the pizza arrived like 30 minutes ago and it's been wafting through the house. So that's the problem with these meetings when you're home, because I know they're out there, I'm in my office here and they're eating pizza. That's not fair. But yeah, we enjoy the opportunity of talking with you and both Representative Wilcox and myself, and I'm a Yelm business. I have my business there in Yelm, and we love the community. We're actively involved. It's been tough because this year, my good friend Dan Nicholson, who's the president of the chamber, and Barbecue Fest was starting to take shape, and it's going to be the second year of that, and the prairie, all the stuff that was going on, and it got canceled. And our company is proud to be sponsors of so many things out there and the things that we do, but it will come back, and we will continue to do the things we do, and we will be able to do this in person and any time that we can. I mean, the schedule is packed, but you can always throw the invite out, and we'll make our way out there to share whatever and listen.
Thank you. One thing that we can do, I just did some work today on a video for our TRPC. They're helping to promote the Census 2020. If we could still push that out, there's still part of Southeast Thurston who have not entered into the census, and those numbers are going to be really important to getting that funding that JT and Andrew will help us get. You're welcome, Mark. Yes, Councilmember DePinto.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one kind of serious question for Rep. Wilcox. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about the process for when Governor Inslee makes one of his proclamations that impacts, without a special session, he makes some of these proclamations, how the four corners come together for that.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. There is nothing that I hate more than those letters.
Yeah.
There's four different bills that go back to, some of them go back to the 80s, that regulate the governor's emergency powers. And when they pass these things, for the most part, there's two things they were thinking about: nuclear war and the Cascadia earthquake. And in both those cases, it would potentially be impossible to get a legislature together. And in one of those cases, maybe there's not even a quorum that survives. And so, the governor has pretty extensive powers. Now, some of the later ones carved out some things where he has to ask the legislature to extend them past 30 days. His ability to basically declare a state of emergency has no limit. The only limit in that is, potentially how long does the emergency last? And that is being tested in court right now. I went and talked to a lot of good attorneys early in the process and asked them, what happens when this is tested in court? And they told me, well, right now you'll be laughed out of court. And that actually was true. If this goes on longer in Washington than, is customary across the country, then you probably have a case. So the basic declaration of the state of emergency that gives him most of his powers is up to him. Now, the legislature can, if we're in session, we could pass some bills. It's not a constitutional thing. We could pass bills that would limit him, and those bills are ready to be dropped. And if you get a majority that'll bring it to the floor and then vote on it, we could modify that. Then there's quite a few other proclamations that in general are suspensions of current law. And there are things like one that we're dealing with right now. has to do with waivers for penalties and interest for late payment of taxes. And the governor has waived those. After 30 days, that requires the agreement of the 4 caucus leaders. You know, I go back to my caucus, I go back to my ranking members, but my name is the one that's on that. And those things generally are things that we think are good. And so we have turned a few of those down. We have asked for modifications of others, and others we have continued to extend, like the one that I mentioned. And another good example is, you know, there is a requirement that assisted living facilities provide constant access to their residents. Well, you know, under these circumstances, although COVID, you know, I'm not a risk factor. COVID didn't really hurt me much, but I worry a lot about my in-laws, and I've got a sister-in-law who absolutely has 2 or 3 different risk factors, and I don't think that her adult family home should be required to let me into her room. And so I have agreed to extend that proclamation as well. And there's a handful of others that are like that. And so I've signed off on those. I've not signed off on others, but these almost all tend to be small issues. The major issue, the governor's ability to issue these emergency proclamations is in his hands and his hands alone. And after this is all over, or when we're back in session, whenever that is, I've got a feeling that there's going to be a really robust discussion about whether or not we should have some other kind of oversight. And if I'm the governor, honestly, I would want to have other people on board. You know, it absolutely is corrosive to a democratic republic to have one person making these decisions. And if I was him, I would want to have more fingerprints on it than just my own. And I've told him and his staff this.
Yeah.
Not that we talk every day, but on the very rare occasions that we do, I've shared that.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
All right,
explanation.
you set me off on a long speech.
Thank you,
No,
though.
I was going to cut you off, but I decided not to. No, I was just going to add that it's important, you know, these proclamations are debated in our caucus, and, you know, if they are important for the citizens of the state to be extended, but we also question the timing and how long they're going to be extended. But there are also prohibitions underneath the original proclamation, the original emergency, the biggest of which is the eviction moratorium. And that is one that we have no say. The leadership, JT and others, have no say in the extension or how that thing runs out. And so that particular one, which has been extremely detrimental to the housing industry, has been just pushed through by the governor unilaterally. And we have been offering solutions as alternatives to that moratorium. Because as you know, I mean, you're in the city council, when you have to put a moratorium on a particular entity or a lot or something to study traffic or whatever, it is never intended to be long-term. It is usually for a very short period of time in order for solutions to be brought forth to move forward. That is what a moratorium is supposed to do, not to run 7 months. This current one runs through October 15th. We're hearing it is now going to be extended beyond that. And it just has really bad consequences. I'll just tell you one other thing. I think it's important. I try to add this to every time I'm talking to a group. It's important to note that both Representative Wilcox, myself, and the entirety of the legislative body, to include the Senate, the governor has not addressed us one time during this entire crisis. We have only been briefed by his staff periodically, and even that is sporadic, you know, whenever. And has limited interaction between the executive and the legislative branch, but the governor himself has never addressed us. And I find that it's difficult for us in the legislative body to do what we're supposed to be asked to do by our constituents, to deal with all these issues when we don't have that type of communication going on. So it's that's why we keep pushing to get back there. We need to get back there to do this work as it is intended.
I have a question from Councilmember Blair.
Thank you, Andrew. Regarding that, the eviction moratorium, I think a lot of what's happened, probably most likely unintended, is there's quite a few renters out there that have taken that as a reason to just not pay rent because they know they're not going to get kicked out, which I hope that people get it squared away before it ends, because once that moratorium lifts, we're going to be looking at evictions on a level that no one even understands. And hopefully you guys are able to work out something that addresses that part of it, because if we think we have a homeless problem now, when that goes down, it's going to be a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah, thanks, James. You know, we have, when I say we, myself, my colleagues in the House and Senate, and also the stakeholders, the property owners, all these various even some tenant advocates, housing authority, we've all been putting forth solutions to this. We have alternatives to this moratorium. I proposed what I was calling the eviction off-ramp, a system utilizing dispute resolution centers throughout the state to offer mandatory mediation, tie it into the CARES Act $100 million worth of rental assistance that has been put forth for the state of Washington to help get people before they get to court, and to try to eliminate all of those, that backlog. It just has fallen on deaf ears. I mean, it just, I hate to say there's a secondary agenda going on here, but I can't understand why you would not accept common sense, reasonable solutions to this crisis. And, you know, guys, I've been in the business for 30 years. I think I know what I'm talking about when it comes to housing people in the state of Washington. This is what I do for a living in my real job. So, I mean, I have seen it firsthand. The bigger thing that people don't understand with this is that it's not just the evictions. It's the fact that we cannot do compliance, notices. We can't do any kind of notices. We can't do lease renewals. We can't charge late fees. We can't. So you have an entire business segment that is being impacted by the governor's unilateral proclamation that is affecting the business model. And, it's affecting our ability to conduct business, to keep my employees employed, and all these different things as a byproduct of this problem. So there are better solutions. And it's indicative, as you as a council know, when you all work together to come up with a solution on something. I mean, this is what we do. This is what we're supposed to do. And there are solutions out there that we could be putting into play right now to lift this moratorium and get, take care of people, keep them in their homes, utilize these resources, get the resources to the city of Yelm to offer rental assistance. I mean, we've shown a pathway to get those funds right down to, communities to be able to offer those that assistance, and it just is not happening at this time. So we're going to continue to fight that fight.
Thank you for your work on that. We do have a local fund, the Yelm Community Relief Fund, and the Action Council of Olympia also is providing rent assistance to people. So there are some local avenues for assistance, but it's going to be a much bigger problem, as James pointed out. We're looking forward to a statewide solution, we hope. Gentlemen, we so appreciate you both being here tonight. You are very welcome to stay on for the rest of this action-packed meeting. But I know you have pizza waiting, Andrew.
Yes, I do. So,
JT's always working. So again, you're welcome to stay. Thank you to Mark Daly for your participation this evening. And if there's no further question for our representatives, we will move on to our next action item.
Well, thank you very much. And I just want to say I should do this more often. I really appreciate all of you. We get paid. I think you guys get paid a pittance. I just appreciate the volunteer effort that all of you do. And I understand better than most just how miserable it can be sometimes too. So thank you for doing that. So many people, you know, want to be a keyboard warrior. You guys are warriors in the real world. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your service and all you do for the community. And thanks for the opportunity tonight. We'll see you again soon, guys.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, folks, that brings us on to, that was a long 15 minutes, but very well worth it. The public comment is the next part of our agenda. We don't have any signed up, and we don't see any from the attendees with their hands raised. So we're going to move on to the consent agenda, which has the minutes and the financial report, which has been there for you to peruse.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Says Council Member Carmody,
Second.
by Council Member Kaminsky. Any discussion? Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None shown. So we, the consent agenda. Nice. So on our new business, oh, there's Mr. Beck. And he's going to talk to us about a housekeeping thing about the Yelm Prairie Line Trail. Grant?
Thank you, Council. I'm here before you tonight to request that you adopt Resolution 607, which authorizes me and our SCJ Alliance, our partners, in making an application to the Recreation and Conservation Office for a grant in order to design and construct Phase 2 of the Yelm Prairie Line Regional Trail. This would extend it, and we've talked about this before with we're going through the abandonment process and filing for a notice of intent for trail use. That process is proceeding per the federal process, which grinds on. But at the same time, we've made application to, again, we applied once in, I think it was 2017, for the Phase 1 construction. So this would extend the trail from its current terminus just south of the power canal all the way out to the bridge and over the bridge into Pierce County. There's another movement from a group in Pierce County. They're going through they received a grant to do the planning for the next phase, and they'll be taking the lead on extending the trail from that point on. So this is the authorization. We've got our application in. We've had a test run with the Technical Advisory Committee. It was very well received. We think the project is going to score really well with the RCO. So we're the last piece of completing the application for that grant agency is this authorization to submit. I'd be happy to answer any questions if Council has them. Was I on mute the whole time?
Yeah. The recommendation is before you in your packet. Councilmember Wood. You're muted.
There we go. Just for clarification, I'm wondering if what you're asking is that we abandoned the rail at this point.
No, we've already made that decision. We're in the abandonment process. This is simply a request to the state for funding to develop the trail.
Okay, I thought we had discussed. My memory of the discussion, I think, might be a little off then, because the way I remember is we had to move forward on this in order to do. There was another project that was waiting. In order for us to do it, we had to approve a certain level of abandonment, I believe, but it didn't exclusively eliminate us from possibly looking at other options for that rail system in the future.
It doesn't preclude a rail in the future, because as we abandon it, it's a two-step process on that piece of it. And again, now we're talking about the building the trail part, but we've applied for the abandonment, and then we basically stayed the abandonment process by filing a notice of intent for trail use. So it's been our intent to convert it to trail. Part of the reason for that is the WashDOT project and the loop crossing. But so that was, we talked about that, I think it was back in April. And at that time, we noted as well that we were applying for this grant opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Pinto.
Thank you, Mayor. Grant, do we have a total project cost for this?
About 1.5 million.
And how much is it, are we applying for RTO?
As much as we can. It's a 20% match. But this wouldn't obligate the city for that. This is just to see if we get the money. We'll have that discussion as part of the upcoming budget.
But if we do get it, it would be 20%, at least 20% for the city of Yelm to put into it.
20% that can also include in-kind contributions. So if we are successful, we'll be working with our partners, the bicycle clubs, the trails. We've been contacted by a rail group that's interested in the iron, the rail line itself. That could be contribution. So we'll do everything we can to keep down the hard cost.
Thank you.
I think Councilmember Carmody had her hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. What do you think the chances are that once we get this application in, that we actually get approved, considering the current economic situation?
I feel very confident that we will be funded. The Technical Advisory Committee, this is money that's already been allocated, so it's not future money. They were very supportive and gave us tons of good constructive feedback in our test run. In September, we'll go before the full committee and make the presentation. I feel very good about it.
Grant, can you remember how many organizations signed letters of support for this application?
Yeah, I think we had 21, which was about 18 more than anybody else has ever submitted.
Yeah, it's extremely well supported in the region as a regional economic driver, as well as an amenity for Yelm. Councilmember Wood?
I just want to be clear. The reason I'm expressing concern about this is the conversation we just had at the beginning of this meeting with Mark Daly in reference to, we've got a congestion problem. We've got a transportation problem. It's getting worse. It's going to be worse by 2040. We're all going to be sitting in our cars, sitting still, waiting for the light to change. What I'm wondering is if I'm concerned that maybe we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here before we've had an opportunity to really analyze the options here, because correct me if I'm wrong, but at this moment in time, and I'm not saying it's a legitimate or a feasible rail system right now, but the more of it we remove and the more of it we take out, the further away from that being a potential source of transportation we get. So it just seems like we're kind of in a big hurry. You know, don't get me wrong. I mean, when I was in high school, the trail system, up in Anchorage, Alaska, the trail systems are amazing. You can go anywhere. But it wasn't done in lieu of taking out a form of transportation that can possibly help us out with the congestion issues we're facing, and apparently by projections we'll be facing to the umpteenth degree in the near future.
So it's not an immediate decision. We've been talking about this for years now, the trail application, and I would argue that, so 1.5 million to build a pedestrian trail, including over the bridge. We did a structural analysis of the bridge to make sure that it was safe for pedestrians. There's a ton of work that we need to do to the tune of about $600,000 just to preserve it. To run rail on that line right now, you're basically rebuilding everything along it anyway. So it's a much higher price tag.
I understand, but that argument is the same argument that the county's given us on the courthouse. It's dilapidated, it's falling down, but reality is the reason that's in that shape is because nobody's done anything or spent any money on maintaining it, and that has exactly the situation we have here.
And there's no connection to the main line anymore from BNSF. So it would have to be a brand new connection at some point to Tacoma Rail. It couldn't be passenger because of the way that whole system works. So no, I don't think we're precluding any future options for transportation alternatives by this application.
Thanks, Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can we get a motion?
I will motion, I don't remember the number. Was it 604 grant?
607.
607. I motion that we authorize Mayor Foster to submit the application to the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office for a grant to design and construct phase 2 of the Yelm Prairie Line Regional Trail.
Second, James.
A second by James Blair. Any other discussion?
Request a roll call vote, please.
A roll call vote will be called for. Is there any other discussion before we take the roll call vote? Okay, Councilmember Blair, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilmember Carmody,
Yes.
Councilmember Curry,
Yes.
Councilmember Stillwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Wood,
No.
Councilmember DePinto,
No.
Councilmember Kaminsky.
Yes.
Those 5 yeses to 2 noes, the resolution is passed and will be submitted to RCO for their consideration. Thank you, Council. Thank you,
Thank you.
Grant.
Thank you very much, Council.
Now, if we have Cody Colt with us, he's going to tell us about the PSC agreement.
Hello, Council. Can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. Okay, so before you have a PSC franchise agreement, it's required by law to kind of present this over 2 meetings. So this will be the first presentation of this, and then we'll have another presentation at a future council meeting, and that'll be when it's up for adoption. So just to give you a rundown, this is an agreement with PSC to supply electricity and gas and services to our area. We have this agreement for 2 reasons. The main being it allows us to leverage physical work if like something gets damaged or anything needs to be repaired. We have this agreement in place that says things need to be done this way over a certain amount of time. It gives them a time limit to do those things. And it also just gives them a secure entity knowing that they can proceed with work and things and know that they won't be kicked out or pushed out because of this agreement in place. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. This is just a re-agreement of what was already previously done in the past. So nothing new here. It's just a new agreement we've been working on. Any questions?
And Mayor, we have representatives from PSC in the audience if the council or yourself has any questions for them.
Thank you for being here, Kelsey. Appreciate that. Any questions for PSC or for Cody Colt? Now, I understand, Cody, that we have to look at this again at the next council meeting before we take action on it.
That is correct.
That gives people in the public an opportunity to take a look at this and comment as well. Councilmember DePinto?
Thank you, Mayor. This doesn't change any past relationships that we've had with PSC, does it? Is it similar contracts?
Very
Not
similar.
Contract, but ordinance.
Yeah, very similar ordinance. And we just some clarifying language to kind of update things to the 21st century. You know, so instead of talking about horses and buggies, we're talking about cars and, you know, electricity lines and, you know, cable lines and stuff like that. So
Any meaningful impacts or anything else?
nope, just the normal agreement stuff.
Okay. Thank you. I move to approve or adopt, or excuse me, this is our first reading. We can do
No
this.
motion necessary. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, all right, excuse me.
That's great. Okay, thank you, Cody, and gives us more time to take a look at this. And we can ask you some questions offline if we have them, and then we'll look forward to seeing this at the first council meeting in September.
Awesome, appreciate it.
All right, nice background.
Get used to seeing this.
All right, that's the end of our new business. We're going to move on to old business, which is ordinance number 1066 regarding term limits. Councilmember Carmody has provided us the latest iteration of this in the packet. So Councilmember Carmody, do you want to introduce this again?
Yeah, so this is basically the same thing that we talked about in the study session and then at the last meeting. And now this would be the final meeting that we could read this at and pass it. I mean, although if we wanted to continue it on forward, we could always do that. What this does is it creates a 2-term consecutive limit for both city council members and mayor. And we have sort of worked the language a little bit so that you can, a member could serve two consecutive terms of city council and then move on to mayor. That would not preclude them running for mayor. Or they could run for 2 consecutive terms in city council, wait out a term, and then go back and rerun. So they could, they could conceivably serve 2, 4, or 6 terms. It depends on how long they would want to be, but this just limits it limits the amount of consecutive terms that they can take. It also doesn't take effect until after the November 10th, 2020 election. I don't think any of us are up for that election. So anybody running after that, it would affect that term. So this term, if you're in office and then you run again, it would affect that term. So like I'm in term number 2, I could conceivably run again, and that would be my final term. But it doesn't affect what you're doing now. So my term limit would not be up at this time. That way it's fair to everybody. Nobody's getting booted out for any particular reason. It's just because we really need to have a new base of potential candidates. We need fresh ideas. It increases how responsive we are to the public. The public really wants to hear from us and, hear our reasoning for the things that we're doing. It provides voters with more choices. It increases voter turnout, hopefully, and it'll ensure better balance of power among the different interest groups. We also are hoping to increase our diversity of members on the city council and, represent more different neighborhoods. Right now, I think, don't EJ and JW and Tad all kind of live in the same neighborhood, or Tad's going to, but I mean, let's spread it out a little bit. It'll also encourage new people to get involved in government. So what we have here is what is going to be voted on tonight. And I know that there was a typo. I'm trying to find it now. Yeah, no, the typos got fixed. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the typos got fixed so that we wouldn't be voting something into an ordinance that had a typo in it. So anyway, that's what this does. I'd be willing to answer any questions. Let's talk.
Well, perhaps it would be best to follow the process with the resolution to see if there's a motion to adopt with a second, and then we could enter into discussion.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and move that the Yelm City Council approve Ordinance 1066 regarding term limits.
Is there a second?
Second, DePinto.
By Councilmember DePinto. Now, discussion ensues. Councilmember Wood.
I just have one question for the council, Mr. Mayor, and just a simple question. I'm wondering if the council members that drafted this and passed it around amongst themselves and figured out how this was going to be, I'm wondering if any of them had anything personal against myself in drafting up this ordinance.
Well, they'd be welcome to address that if they'd like. Remember, council, we try not to devolve into personal arguments about this, but if you have something that you would like to address on that, you certainly could.
Comment.
Councilmember Blair.
In response to Councilmember Tracy Wood, I believe that was addressed at the study session, that there was no personal, what's the word I'm looking for, drive behind this. I can only speak for myself, but I can say that I never had any inclination that anyone was doing this because of a personal reason towards anyone in particular. My support behind term limits is in general for any elected office out there, period, doesn't matter. So I just want that made very clear.
Councilmember Wood.
The reason I reiterated the question, Councilmember Blair, is because not the entire council was present when I proposed that that concern at our previous meeting. I just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to address that concern of mine if there was any sort of input anybody would have liked to add it.
Councilmember DePino.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't draft it, but I did take a look at a copy of it and gave some remarks on it. And basically, I didn't say anything much. I said I approved it or something like that. It was not personal for me. But I do believe there's an amendment to address you specifically. You're concerned that it was personal. And I'm not sure if that amendment's going to be out or not, but basically it would not apply to any council member currently serving. So that would eliminate your personal worry.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, James.
So there's a couple amendments that I actually wanted to put forward on this one. First off, to address the feelings that possibly this was meant towards any specific person, under application, I believe, which is 2.05.040, I wanted some wording added to it to state any person who previously served as an elected official but has not served as an elected official for 4 years or more prior to election day shall be eligible for nomination or election for any elected position. So basically, that I think that kind of more clarifies the fact that you could serve 2 terms and you would then be limited out, quotation marks, but then after being out for 4 years, you would then be eligible to serve again, rather than making it to where you could only ever serve 2 terms and then be done.
Councilmember Carmody, would you address that? Because you talked about that just a moment ago about how the original language covers that.
Yeah, James, thank you. We actually did change that language to say consecutive years. So under 2.05.010, we said no person shall be elected or appointed to more than 2 consecutive terms as an elected official in the city of Yelm. It doesn't say anything about not being able to go for, to skip a term, essentially. If you wanted to add the language just that somebody could skip a term and then come back in, we could certainly do that. I don't know if it's necessary at this point. If it comes down to it, and somebody wanted to rerun again, they would always come back to this language and say that it's not specifically limited to that. If you want to add that language in, that's not a problem, but I don't think that we need it in there right now.
My thoughts was to have it in there to just have it very clear. That way there was no confusion.
I see a comment from Tracy Wood.
I had an opportunity to read the ordinance and all the correspondence going along with it as well. So I'm very clear on exactly what the ordinance was, and that wasn't what my question was. I just wanted to give the council an opportunity to, from my point, being fair to everyone and not just pinpointing anybody particular. I wanted the entire council to have that opportunity. I'm not concerned about it. Honestly, I think that it's, as I mentioned before, and I think that the council, at least some of the council, will agree with me that we have an election system here in the United States of America that allows for folks to elect and vote for who they want to put into position. And I understand the purpose of the term limits for the President of the United States, which looks like a lot of this was drafted off of that language. The purpose behind that is because the man appoints Supreme Court justices. If you left that man in power too long, your entire Supreme Court would be appointed by one man. And I can see the dangers involved in that. But through all of this, I just don't see it holds no logic. I have been here I'm in my 3rd term. I've been here long enough to remember when the mayor ran for office along with another council member, that the county had to leave the running open for an extra week in order to get anybody to run to fill the positions, because there was nobody filling positions. So, and I am, as you like to mention, I'm in my 3rd term, and that's because I believe I must be doing a good job, because the first election was the only one that I had an opponent in, and then the last 2 I haven't, which leads me to believe either there's no interest to the degree where they'll let anybody do it, or I must be doing a pretty good job. So I don't understand the basis of this term limits, the points that I've heard being made as to the reasoning behind this are they're illegitimate. They're not true. They're just not, they're false. And I think that we've carried on long enough, and I think we ought to vote on this.
We have people in queue to comment. Councilmember Kaminsky, then DePino, and then I think Carmody too.
I was just going to confirm that there are no limits on running. Right now, everything is open, correct, for these term limits. So I don't know, maybe I'm just weary of government restrictions, and I kind of agree with Tracy. I don't really see the huge benefit in it. And I think the elections themselves suffice and give an answer. So I probably would think this is not necessary and wouldn't want to do it at this point.
Councilmember DePino, then Stillwell. Actually, Molly, were you in queue after Joe? No. Well, Councilmember DePino, then Stillwell, then Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. To Councilmember Wood's first point about if this was personal, for those of you that are watching on home and listening in, Councilmember Wood did a public records request upon all the council members for their personal cell phones, their personal messages, their emails, and all that personal information. This is, first of all, this is unheard of. I've never had another council member do a public records request on me or anyone else to my knowledge. First of all, so instead of just asking us, which he had the option to, and he didn't ask for those details. He was asked by the city administrator if he wanted to go down that route or if he wanted to do a public records request. A public records request also takes a lot of staff time, as was stated in the email from our staff. So first of all, I was really disappointed to see him do that. But second of all, to the second point is why you didn't have an opponent against you the second time. The first time you ran against somebody, you challenged the incumbent. Jen Littlefield, she wasn't the appointed incumbent. My mistake. I thought she was, and you ran against her, and I think you won by a couple dozen points of votes, I thought. But if I got that vote record wrong, I apologize. But the second point regarding why you don't have anyone run against you as an incumbent, and you could, and anyone else can make their own points to this too, is why someone runs against an incumbent, why someone doesn't. But we had multiple people, we had what, 6 or 7 people run for the open council seat, the vacant one that Councilmember Curry was appointed to. We had
without an election.
Please don't interrupt me, Councilmember Wood. I didn't interrupt you. Please don't interrupt me. For that appointment, we had multiple people run for that appointment or seek that appointment slot. For the previous one, we also had multiple people run for that one. And a lot of those people did not run or seek election the next term because it isn't easy to go up against an incumbent. There's an inherent advantage to being an incumbent with name recognition, with fundraising abilities, with networking. There's a lot of reasons why someone would want to run against the incumbent. So I just don't see that point. Either of those, for me, they're moot. I think that it is important in an amendment, if it says that we don't have, if it's not personal for you, if we can make it an amendment so that it doesn't impact anyone currently on council or the mayor, I would happily entertain that. I want this and I'm speaking for myself and not for any other council members, but I want this for the future of Yelm, not necessarily for those that are on council now, even though I would like to see it and I'm holding myself to it personally. I wouldn't expect you to hold yourself to that if you don't want to. I would never say that. But in the future, I don't want this to happen. That's just my personal. I don't think someone should be in there for a lifetime if they could win it, if they should so want it. I just don't believe in career politicians in that sense.
Councilmember Stillwell. Sorry, Trace, you're going to have to wait a bit.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. First of all, Councilmember DePino, I really appreciated your going over this during the study session. You did a really good, I really do appreciate the pros and cons you did, and I've weighed on it. And I will admit that when I first ran, I thought term limits was something that really was important. And we've talked about it over the last 8 years or so. However, in that time, I also have come to realize the importance of those relationships that are built between council members or mayors or, the whole group of us. And so I think that's equally as important. For myself personally, I said I wouldn't run for more than 2 terms, and I won't because it's tiring, and I want somebody else to, and I'm building a house outside the city limits. So in my opinion, I agree with some of these. I see both sides. I do think you did a good job, but I think in reality is we need that consistency. If it's 3 terms, 4 terms, we've had some great career politicians federally in the state. And so I think the voters are intelligent enough to institute it. And I do understand it's hard to run against an incumbent, but I think that they are intelligent enough to make that choice. Thank you.
Councilmember Curry?
Well, I'm just thinking back over the last couple months, and thank God that Georgia did not institute term limits, because John Lewis had a great 30 years of putting civil rights legislation through that would have been lost. So I really am not for term limits. I think the ballot box will speak for itself.
Councilmember Wood, we're back to you.
Actually, I think I've said what I needed to say. Unfortunately, I don't believe all the council members are completely aware of all that took place during the process, and I don't think it's going to behoove anybody for me at this point to carry on in this conversation. So at that point, I think we should call for the vote.
We do have something that's sort of hanging out there. Councilmember Blair had proposed a conceptual amendment. I don't know if what Councilmember Carmody said addressed that sufficiently for you, Councilmember Blair. But if you do have an amendment suggested, it would be helpful if you could read it and place it in the appropriate part of the resolution.
Sorry, it wasn't unmuting. I missed that part of it, so I think that does address that issue. There was the other part where I think Councilmember Carmody was talking about if it applies, where it applies to current terms. Ideally, I would not want current and past terms being included in this. I would want it being a fresh start as soon as it started. So for instance, if it's the current date on here is the November 10th, 2020 election, that meaning moving forward from that, the next election for city council and I believe mayor is in 2021. Whoever won those terms, the beginning of that term would be the first one counting towards this ordinance. Is that how this is worded?
No.
Councilmember Carmody?
No, it's worded to affect, let me go back to it here. It's worded to affect anybody who's currently holding office. This would be considered their first term, regardless of how many terms they've already served. And then if they're the following election, they were reelected, that would be considered their second term. So no matter how many terms they've served previously, it doesn't matter. This one would be considered the first term. The second one that they would be elected to after November 2nd would be considered the second term.
That help, James?
So real quick, that would be under application, correct?
Yeah, that's under application.
Okay,
Yeah.
So currently it says the term limits described in this chapter shall apply to terms of office beginning on or after the general election held on November 10, 2020. So all of the current terms right now do not begin on or after that date. Therefore, my understanding would be that all current terms and past terms do not count in this ordinance, and it would be the terms following, i.e. the 2021 election. Those terms would be the first term counted as your consecutive, I guess. I mean, that's my understanding of what this reads. And if that's what it is, then I'm fine with that. The biggest thing for me is not having current or past terms counted towards this, because like I said, I don't want this being as we're trying to push anyone out or anything like that. It's just a thing moving forward. And the biggest thing for me, why I support term limits, and it's for anyone, even I know there's some great representatives in Congress and in the Senate that have done a great job and have had decades of service. But at the end of the day, for me, no one should hold any office for that long. no one should have that power for an extended amount of time. It's not what a republic should be in my view, and that's why I'm supporting this. But I just want to clarify that first, that current terms are not counting towards this. And from what I read from this, that's what that says.
Can I answer?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so no, that's not the way it's written, but I'm just gonna ask the general, the council here, if we add that language into if we add James's language into the thing, is it gonna change anybody's mind about the way they vote? No, EJ, Tracy, Terry, so there's no point in adding it. Nobody's gonna change their mind. So.
All right, Joe. Yeah, we shouldn't do that. We don't ask for people how they're going to vote while we're doing the discussion, but Councilmember DePino?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, no, Councilmember Blair, I really appreciate you putting forward and taking the time to write up those amendments. But I mean, even if this wasn't personal, you saw that, you know, how the reaction was. It was going to fail either way. So let's just take the 4-3 vote and let's get it going.
So that sounds like a call for the question, which that means, James, you can give up at this point your search for an amendment. Are you comfortable with that?
I'll go ahead and just pull it back. I would like to call for a roll call vote.
Okay, I saw one more hand go up. So before we'll have to vote on the call for the question, and then I can go back to Councilmember Wood, who is in queue. So in regards to calling for the question, how do you vote, Councilmember Blair?
Could you please clarify what you mean by?
I'm asking the council if they want to end discussion and move to the vote. Yes or no?
Yes.
And Councilmember Carmody?
Yes.
Councilmember Curry?
Yes.
Councilmember Stillwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Wood?
Yes.
Councilmember DePino?
Yes.
And Councilmember Kaminsky?
Yes.
Okay, the council has agreed to end discussion and call for the vote. And so in regards to ordinance number 1066, how do you vote, Councilmember Blair?
Yes.
Councilmember Carmody?
Yes.
Councilmember Curry?
Nay.
Councilmember Stillwell?
Nay.
Councilmember Wood?
Nay.
Councilmember DePinto?
Oh, yeah.
Councilmember Kaminsky?
Nay.
That's 4 nays to 3 yays. Interesting discussion, and this fails the resolution, but it does not stop the council from bringing it up again in future iterations down the road. So thank you, council, for having a very respectful conversation about this, and we can now move on to the rest of our agenda, which is updates first from City Administrator Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Can everyone hear me okay, or should I turn the video off?
No, you're good.
Perfect. So just a couple of quick updates, and then I'll let the council go. I think Councilmember Stillwell has a very extensive public safety briefing that he wants to provide for folks. So I'll just hit the high points on other topics. Just to let you know, we're going into budget season. Heidi is going to present at the next meeting the detailed budget calendar that has the real specific dates for the timelines, the public hearings, the workshops, and all that stuff. And that'll really set the course for us for the rest of the year. In addition to working on the base budget and working on water rights, preparing for an audit upcoming that happens around this season, and dealing with all the COVID reimbursements for the CARES Act, we're pretty swamped. So we're going into autopilot here with the budget season, and we'll look forward to working with you all on adopting the upcoming biennial budget. Couple of general updates for you. All the COVID funds have been expended, and we have a report that we'll give to you with all the details on the recipients, the grant amounts, etc. The hand sanitizer, I think last update we had 14 gallons. We're down to 13 now. There are two. What?
We're down to 1 gallon in the barrel.
Well, 1 gallon at the barrel, but we have 12 in reserve at City Hall. Yep. So if anyone really needs some, we've got some extra, but we're putting it to good use. We have two businesses that have been frequent flyers of the hand sanitizer, and I'll just share their names because if you go get business for them, it's going to be clean. It's going to be well taken care of and sanitized. That's the PTL Hardwood and the Fun Time Toys. So very clean operation that they're running over there. In addition to filing the report with the CARES Act with Commerce, we're really excited to see the work that's going to start here restoring the water tower. That should kick off here in the next week and hopefully be done by the end of September. So really excited to see that happening. Watch for updates on our Facebook page and our website. Mill Road sidewalk just finished up. It looks absolutely fantastic. We'll be putting photos out on social media for everyone, but that's going to be a huge improvement for pedestrian safety and the schools and that local neighborhood over there. A couple of efficiency updates. You've heard a lot about City Works and some of the struggles that we've had with that. We decided to end the agreement with them, and we're now moving forward with a new vendor called Dude Solutions. Fantastic name, but the significant cost savings and most importantly, much easier to implement. So Cody will be giving you all a briefing on that coming forth with the budget. But I just wanted to let you know about that efficiency that we're finding there with that new vendor. Speaking of other partnerships, we are also entering into a contract with Thurston County for animal control beginning January 1st. And this will be again, a cost savings for us and a good partnership. They'll use our facility, but they'll take care of our animals. So it'll be a one-stop resource for the residents of our community, and it'll lighten the load of the public works folks so that they can go out and attend to other things rather than chasing lost animals. Yes, Councilmember DePino?
Is that a contract the council has to approve or anything, or is it already budgeted for next year?
It will be part of the budget that'll be coming up, and then that'll be something that you guys will see at a future council meeting.
And Councilmember Carmody had a question.
Yeah, my question was the same question. So you've already signed the contract?
No, I was saying we are going to have a contract with Thurston County Animal Control beginning January 1st.
Okay, so you have not signed the contract?
No.
Okay, and that's something that council needs to approve, right?
I don't recall if you specifically need to approve it, but it's something that we are going to bring before you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge savings for us, both from an operations perspective and a monetary perspective. And frankly, we've approached them before. I've been in those meetings where we've reached out to them. They've had a change of staff and a change of heart. We've also had a change of staff, and he's got a great heart. So we're really excited about this new partnership that hasn't been open to us before. So really excited to work with them. Also, something else that we're considering is a fleet management repair and replacement program, just to help with our ER&R fund that we've been implementing. And that's something that we're considering through Enterprise. So that'll be another briefing that we'll be providing to you later as we go through the budget. Other changes, as you can imagine, with the changes in schools regarding the pandemic, we've had to work with the school district and have some new options for funding and allocation of staff resources for the school resource officer. So that'll be another change. They'll be lessening their contribution and fee, obviously, because they'll be utilizing that next. That'll result in a schedule change and a budget change. So something else to keep your eyes on going forward. We continue to work on water rights and implementing our COVID response plan, and really look forward to having the budget conversations kick off with you here over the next couple of meetings. On a personal note, I'm going to be taking off tomorrow evening, and I'll be out of pocket email and cell phone range on a road trip with the family in an RV. So if I'll have an out of office message. If you need anything, I will have a designated city administrator, and obviously, as always, reach out to the mayor and he can connect and help you in any way possible. So I'll look forward to connecting with you back on Labor Day. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
All right, then let's move on to Councilmember Blair.
I was on vacation, so did not. The only one I think I missed was slack while I was down. But I'm gonna get with Michael Stedman. He's gonna kind of get me caught up on that a bit. And then today, I was not present for the public safety meeting. There was some personal stuff going on, but I called Tad ahead of time and let him know.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Carmody.
So at the finance committee meeting, we had our little finance lesson about bonds. This time it was about the bonds that we borrow, not the bonds that we invest in. So that was a really good little lesson, and we got some breakdowns from Heidi, the financial director. She said that we are actually above revenue, above the expected revenue. Of course, this was all in the packet that we got today, but we are above revenue in sales, in sales tax. So that's really good. We're doing okay. And then we met with Public Works, and we talked about some different ways to structure the water, the utility bill. I think it's going to work out really well, especially moving forward. Let's see, intercity transit. Let me find my thing here. Intercity Transit donated 27 surplus laptop computers to students enrolling in local school districts, and Yelm did receive several of those, as did Tumwater. Tumwater and Yelm received the most of those. And they also confirmed the annual transit development plan update schedule. So we also got an update on their equal employment opportunity program and the operator training program. It's really interesting, all the training that they go through to be able to give people safe rides through all kinds of different situations. So it was a really fascinating introduction to that. So that's about all I have, though.
Thank you. Councilmember Curry.
I was also at the Public Works meeting, and it's exciting going forward. The senior center had their open air swap meet 2 weeks ago, and we brought in about $1,600. And my EMT meeting was canceled, and I start all over again next week. And that's it.
All right. Councilmember Stillwell.
Yes, I had my fun study meeting on Friday morning, nice 8:00 a.m. start time. A lot of great information, a lot of good things going on still. Tenino is trying to create more of their money or script. There's just a huge amount of great things that every community is doing. And again, they thanked Yelm and recognized us for our efforts in this as well, and the city council. And then tonight I attended the public safety committee. I laughed because I made really nice notes and I left them on my desk when I ran home. So I'm gonna try to do my best, Chief Stansel. So all the vehicles are outfitted and on the road. Our detective has a hybrid Ford Focus, which is getting some crazy amount of miles per gallon, like 25 miles a gallon or something. And as the fleet is moved over to the hybrid model, we stand to save about, it's a huge amount of money. I don't even want to estimate, it's something like $25,000 a year. And I hope I have that right, but it's a lot of money. No, over the life of the car. I don't know. The department's going to save a lot of money on gas. The Lexipol, which is the system that updates our protocol manuals, is almost done, which is good. And then moving on to new business that we spoke about, we have a few applicants for our lateral officer, and interviews will start pretty soon. The department is looking into non-lethal use of force options, which is pretty exciting, actually. Rather than tasers, it's there's two particular ones we spoke about that are like a Spider-Man web that comes out of a unit that so people can't run or fight, which is kind of nice. And we are also in legal with Capital Metro Incident Investigation Team. What that is helpful with the 940 thing that was passed in 2018, revised in 19. And that is going to give advisory capacity investigation from other outside agencies. That'll also include 2 community members, which we are also going to attempt to get our people on board with that through the Police Advisory Board, which is, we'll see that during our first study session, the new words, and see if we can stand that up, and taking possibly 2 or some people, get them training and get them on the incident investigation team. That's it.
Well, for having forgotten your notes, you did a pretty good job. And I think you popped Tracy's balloon.
Well, you know, I'm thankful he forgot his notes because he didn't get everything.
All right. There you go.
Yes, we have got the new vehicles. If I understood him, the chief, it was $25,000 to $30,000 a year in fuel savings. And another thing, Sonia from courts mentioned that we are in fact doing passports by appointment, and it's probably the fastest place you're going to be able to get it done. So if you need one, go ahead and get in there and make your appointment. If you know somebody, let them know. They'll thank you for a long time to come. And that's my report.
There's a question from Councilmember Carmody on that.
Yeah, I just had a quick question to either Tad or Tracy. How do citizens go about applying to the Police Advisory Committee?
When we see that come back to us, it's all going to be lined out. The verbiage was from 1990 something, and we remember
99.
And remember, we revisited it, and we didn't get any traction on it in 2016. So it's really clear now, and then from there we'll try to stand that up. Used to be 12 members, now it'll be 6 with a maximum of 12, and I think we'll get more people involved. The chief was talking, with current things, people want to be involved. So I think we really will get some traction on this. And once we see it at study session, it's really well laid out.
Okay, cool. I know at least 3 or 4 people who wanted to apply, so that's cool.
All right. And that was all from you, Councilmember Wood?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember DePinto.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, the Public Works Committee attended that, but it's pretty well covered by Council Members Carmody and Curry. The only other thing that I wanted to mention this week was that the Nisqually Indian Tribe is opened up their 2020 charitable funds for their application process, and it'll be open till September 25th, and that's open for any nonprofits. And Yelm's been very fortunate and does pretty well with Nisqually Tribe being very generous towards our community. So I hope that lots of folks apply for it. If any nonprofit has any questions about it or would like to apply for something, I'd be happy to walk them through it and help them out. That's it.
All right. Councilmember Kaminsky.
Finance Committee was covered very nicely by Council Carmody. Thank you very much. Good job. And the Nisqually River Council, in conjunction with the Mount Rainier National Park System, they're planning a process where they're re-looking at the entrance, traffic, everything to the park, the whole corridor that connects with the Nisqually. And they are asking for public comment about how they can improve the overall experience of the mountain and going up to Paradise. So their comment period is open August 10th to October 5th. I think you just go online and give them your information, and they're trying to, create a better experience for us and for future generations. We also had a long discussion about salmon recovery, and there is a portal that's available to the public. There's a database that tracks all the information about the salmon. And we had a very cool presentation about the orcas, which is it's fascinating the way they can track them, identify them. Every resident orca has a name. The humpback whales are in great shape. Everything's good with them. The transient whales are fantastic because they eat apparently all the ghost shrimp in the Puget Sound. But the resident whales are still not doing well because they eat the salmon and we don't have enough salmon. And the good news that they ended with is that little baby whale that carried her dead calf all around the sound. She's pregnant again. So that was the good news. That's my report.
Thank you. So briefly, over the past couple of weeks, I've attended some AWC webinars. One's a 2-parter on racial equity. Very good information background from the presenters. and good perspective encountered from other cities, what they're going through, and nice to reflect back that we don't have their issues here, but we do take what they're saying very seriously when we're looking at our policies, which is again what we're doing with Lexipol, to make sure that nowhere within our city structure, our policies, protocols, or resolutions, anything, ordinances, have that bias that can sometimes find their way in there. This lecture series is a good way to open our eyes to look at those things with that lens and make sure that we're going forward in a good way. We also started as you'll see more of at the study session, initiated the budget talks with the management team so that they'll be able to present what the bare minimum budget's going to look like going forward. The big rocks talk, as we call it. And then very interestingly to us, perhaps, we have been engaged with the county and the other cities through the Human and Health Services Council, which was also the community investment partnership with United Way for a number of years. And we had to buy our way into that through we gave 1/2 of 1% of our sales tax revenue to this. It wasn't a huge amount of money from us, but it gave us a seat at the table. We actually used our CDBG grant monies to pay for that over the past 3 years. That has morphed, and it is now those duties are being taken over by a regional housing council, which will have lots of different entities involved in it. And Yelm will still continue to have a seat at the table, but we will no longer have to contribute monies to the fund. So I will be representing Yelm and actually South County mayors at this regional housing council, and I have already participated in the first formation meeting, and very good discussion. We will be part of the process by which these many dollars come in from federal and state funding sources to provide housing alternatives and solutions in the greater Thurston County area. So glad to be a part of that. And then just to keep on track of things, I was in another webinar today from the Department of Commerce to make sure that we are utilizing the Coronavirus Relief Fund monies correctly. And Michael's staying on top of that as far as how we submit for reimbursement. Remember that they didn't give us a check yet. They gave us an idea of how much we could ask for, and we will ask for every nickel of it. But we have to make sure that we're doing it appropriately. And so far, we sound like we are doing it very well. And then lastly, just a heads up, put it on your calendar. We are partnering again with Bloodworks Northwest. They're going to have another blood drive at the community center October 1st and 2nd, which is actually a Thursday, Friday this time, to try to get a different demographic in there. And what's really great about this is now they are set up. If you register for this blood drive, they're going to test your blood for COVID-19 antibodies. So if you may have been exposed and maybe you didn't even know it, but you've developed antibodies, they'll be able to tell you that within a couple of weeks after your donation of blood. That would make you then eligible to donate plasma towards that effort that's going on. The medical community is studying giving COVID-19 antibody positive plasma to COVID-19 victims early on in the onset of their disease to see if it can help them fight that disease. So if you're interested in giving blood and finding out if you've had COVID-19 and developed antibodies, October 1st and 2nd, and they'll even give you cookies. So with that, thank you, Terry. With that,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.